Thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank the organizers, the museum, and I come here with mixed feelings, because I believe that what you are doing is great in all aspects. I work in New York with people who have various disabilities, and we have a large group, a large target audience, 200 to 250 individuals per year. I'm not a geneticist, but I would like to introduce the subject. It's impossible to fit it all in 40 minutes. It's just not doable, but I'm going to present you an introduction to genetics so that you can understand what we are discussing today. When I was preparing for the talk, I found some really horrific numbers, statistics, and I'll highlight them later. But let's begin with the elementary level, the cell. This is the basic building block of the organism. And this is something that builds up everything that we are. The DNA, we're all familiar with this idea, and you should remember that this is relatively recent scientific knowledge. So, all living organisms have DNA. Every cell, practically, has the same set of DNA. Most of it is present in the nucleus, but a group of DNA molecules is present in mitochondria. Genes. Every DNA molecule is built up of 4 structural elements. And this unique combination of these elements, which is present in a certain site of the DNA, is a gene. All genes together are called a genome. And you all have heard, I think, that the human genome has been read completely. And this should give us some hope. These small things could be glossed over, but they really are responsible for us all being different. The alleles. For example, they encode eye color. These are alleles. Chromosomes. 2 DNA molecules cross over, as you see them here in the picture, and they make up a chromosome with different arms. And so for specialists, it is always listed in which chromosome and at which site of the chromosome a gene is located. For example, chromosome 5, long arm. This is karyotype, meaning the listing of all chromosomes. They are arranged in couples. We have them all duplicated, because we receive 1 in each pair from 1 parent. We have 22 pairs which are autosomal, that's the technical term, and 1 pair is the sex chromosomes. Women have 2 copies of an X chromosome, men have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome. What happens in case of mutations in a genome? Really nothing good comes of it. For example, chromosome pair 21 can be afflicted with trisomy with a 3rd unnecessary chromosome that leads to Down syndrome. We know that this can be found even before a human is born, at the state of pregnancy. A lot of genetic disorders can now be identified in a fetus. Most cases of trisomy or monosomy, meaning wrong number of chromosomes, are fatal. The child does not survive. But sometimes children are born with broken, reconstructed chromosomes and so on. And this leads to various disorders. Sex chromosomes can also be afflicted with trisomia and monosomia, meaning abnormal number 1 or 3, but this will not afflict the vital functions of the body. And now the discouraging statistics. More than 12,000 inheritable diseases and development anomalies have been found today. We are not able to highlight them all in 40 minutes. About 5% of all children are born with some or other genetic disorders or defects. And one more frightening statistic. For example, ASD, autism spectrum disorders. It's believed that in the United States, 1 in 68 children is somehow afflicted, is on the spectrum. In the state of New Jersey, it's 1 out of every 42 children, because they have a lot of farms there, and one of the things that are believed to affect the possible mutations that lead to ASD are various chemicals in the environment. For example, like 1 mile from a farm, this is the zone where more children are born with ASDs than in other places. Classification. Let's take a look at several classification attempts, because a final, ultimate classification is not made yet. The working classification is made up in the following way. Number 1, disorders provoked by a mutation of a single gene. Number 2, chromosomal syndromes, when a chromosome arm is broken. That's group number 2. Multi-factor disorders. These are connected with both genetic factors and environmental factors. I think you have heard about some disorders being provoked in a certain ethnic group. That's because of their genetic legacy. And in the last decade, imprint disorders were identified. They do not manifest all the time. Factors must coincide, so they may manifest in every second generation. A classification according to the type of metabolic disorders. These are disorders in the exchange of amino acids, fats, carbohydrates, minerals, and so on. A classification by organ or system in the organism. Blood diseases, endocrinal system diseases, kidney diseases, nervous and muscular system diseases, and so on. Chromosome anomalies. We have discussed this already. Sometimes chromosomes are broken, or some of them are missing. It's interesting that when we have a lot of evidence, when there is a lot of genetic material, the body wants to pick the best genetic material possible. Maybe that's why the age of parents may have a correlation to the development of a disease. They believe that Down syndrome is more probable if the woman gives birth after 35 years. And this is the only disorder when a person has 1 unnecessary chromosome and survives. And in 90% of cases, the extra chromosome comes from the mother's egg and not from the father's sperm. That's why they correlated with the age of the woman. Down syndrome. Jérôme Lejeune was a geneticist that discovered a lot of different things. In 1959, he discovered this chromosomal nature of the disease. This syndrome can be manifested in different degrees of intellectual disability. You know that there are a lot of people right now, today, that have good quality of life and live long, because the cardiovascular problems can be treated, and this is something that is concomitant with this syndrome. and their life expectancy is now much longer than before. A lot of people graduate from colleges. There are actors, there are singers, there are professors that have Down syndrome. Williams syndrome is a disease where elastin is not present in the body. This biological chemical is formed when blood vessels are formed in the body. And later on, in an adult body, it does not form. Here, there is no real cure. I've tried to show here pictures, photos of children with this relevant syndrome. This particular disease is rather rare, but still it has very specific manifestations on the body. Another interesting disease discovered by Jérôme Lejeune, the cri du chat syndrome, the syndrome of cat's cry. It is hard to diagnose after a certain age because the structure of the vocal tract changes with age. And that's why the diagnostics becomes complicated. Depending on the genes that are missing, the symptoms may be different. As in many other disorders of this type, and in developmental disabilities of this kind, there is no treatment for this one either, but the individual can be helped developing their language skills, motor skills, and develop in a fulfilling way and live a fulfilling life. This is a very interesting syndrome. Lately, a lot of things that used to be connected with autism are now considered to be manifestations of the broken X chromosome syndrome. I've read a lot of papers and I've been at conferences that deal with differentiating between two things, keeping them apart. And it's interesting that what used to be considered a case of autism is easily now classified as broken X chromosome case. Because when a person is avoiding eye contact, but understands everything that happens around them and is aware of the situation, is aware of what's happening around, what has said anything, this looks like a symptom for broken X chromosome, not autism spectrum disorders. Many disorders are now classified into this group. About 1 in every 3 individuals with this syndrome have ASDs together with this one, and this affects their social interactions. Cohens syndrome. Cohens syndrome is a rare syndrome, and this is the way people with this disease look. This disease leads to the mouth being constantly open because the distance between the nose and the upper lip is shortened genetically. But these are just the outward manifestations. The development, intellectual development may vary from next to norm to very afflicted. Phenylketonuria, PKU, is a disorder which has good outlooks, because in early diagnostics, this case of a disorder in amino acid exchange may be treated well. This disease has an incidence of 1 in 10,000 newborn children. But if this is not diagnosed, then the body poisons its own tissues, and the consequences are not reversible. However, in early diagnostics and with special diet regimen, this can be controlled. The next big group are ASDs, and I'm going to highlight them in detail later. But the statistics is discouraging. No one knows exactly why this happens. Maybe it's just due to the fact that diagnostics was worse before, and there was a diagnosis of infant schizophrenia, which is not justified by any medical facts, which was diagnosed instead of ASDs. But the Education Department of the United States believes that 10 to 17% is the annual growth of incidence of the disease. And lately, this has been connected with environmental factors to a larger degree than before. Learning difficulties. All these disorders are somehow connected to learning difficulties in this way or another. As there is no radical drug treatment, we should do something else to help the individuals. Of course, in case of early diagnostics, both medical and educational interventions are possible to improve the condition of the individual. But after the early childhood, it's very much important to take care of the physical health of the individual, to develop their skills, to develop their attention span, their concentration skill. Because very often, for both children and adults with these syndromes, it's very hard to keep concentrated on things. Socialization is very important as well. Because if individuals with ASDs are socialized and highly functional in the society, then they're able to live a fulfilling life, to live independently. Unlike healthy individuals, they don't have mirror neurons, which would enable them to receive, to attain social skills as we do by mimicking other people's, by aping them. When we are talking to a small child, when we are feeding a child, we are moving our lips as if we are eating, in the same manner as an ape would mimic one's gestures and facial expressions. In people with ASDs and other learning difficulties, the mirror neurons are affected and they are not able to mimic the other's actions. I'm going to highlight some other conditions and learning difficulties very quickly. Learning difficulties are very diverse and very often they coexist in a single individual. Hearing perception disorders. These don't mean deafness and hearing impairment by themselves. Very often these people can perceive music well, but speech not very well. They can skip words, they can mistake the word they hear for another one, or maybe background noise may distort the information for them. They have problems with understanding long sentences or quick speech. They do not answer questions when they are addressed. They ask one to repeat even if they have heard this correctly. Dyscalculia. This has to do with counting. A person having trouble counting, performing mathematical operations, has troubles understanding time, addresses, seasons, and so on. Dysgraphia. This has to do with handwriting and putting one's thoughts on paper in general. For example, we've got a guy in our program who is an extremely talented painter. He creates his own comics. He creates characters. He's a very talented artist. He works great with details, haircuts, clothes of the characters. He invented a new race of people who come from a different planet, and he is very good at describing this all. But he doesn't put spaces between words, so it's hard to read what he writes. He's quite sociable and well socialized, but he's lucky. His family supports him in a great way and cares about his education, including going to museums with him, as he is so talented as an artist. Both his elder brother and his parents go with him to museums and tell him about different techniques of visual arts. He knows many artists. He's able to read Othello. He uses words that are hard to find in a dictionary. He's very well read and he does not simplify his language at all. When he saw a new person, when he met a new person, he used to always come up to them and tell them about what he does, about his work, about his comic novel, graphic novel, and it was very hard to extricate oneself from a dialogue with him. He couldn't understand that other people may need to go. He just would talk on and on. And in the 2 years that he has been in our program, he has learned to limit himself to 5 minutes. And then he says, if you have more time for talking, I would be happy to tell you more. This is a good step forward. And he takes part in different team projects. He has a job, he does sports. So besides his graphic novel, which I have promised him to print, he has a lot of things to do. But for him, getting it published is not the main stimulus, because he just likes describing all those small details. But now he has other activities. Now, dyslexia, a very well-known condition, and it can include a diverse set of manifestations. Counting, handwriting, speech impediments. Now, purely speech impediments, both acoustic perception disorder and language perception disorder. Many people say, well, this word is just over there, but I can't remember this particular word. This is a mild case of this disorder. Sometimes for people with this condition, it's easier to draw things than to tell the word. Visual perception deficit. Sometimes children can confuse letters that look similar, like Russian B and V, or English P and B. Sometimes they struggle with writing or with reading, or they press the pencil too hard in their hand and break it. The handwriting is jagged. Dyspraxia, next. So you see how diverse those disorders are. This is about motoric coordination. This person might seem clumsy. They struggle planning their movement, coordinating between left and right side of the body. Eye-hand coordination may be impeded. They have it hard to organize their own actions. Small motoric actions are hard for them, like completing a puzzle. What can we do about this all? I visited a conference recently, and I really liked the motto that they had. And currently there is a large movement that says everybody can work. And each day and the whole life filled with some meaning is definitely a great goal for this. And in our program, we are completely integrated into the society. Every day we are in there. We're working, volunteering, we're working out with the members, we visit museums, we've got a project that works with blind children, We've got a lot of interns, and I think my colleague here will present this in more detail. Several people every year work in large museums across the city. And they have done a lot. Our blind guys translated a lot of materials for the museums into Braille. You can imagine the costs of it all if the museum paid for this. But this is a great solution, because I believe that they not just prove to themselves that they can do as much as others, even more, but they also prove it to the society. How they're able to work as a whole, how well they're able to work. It's hard to overcome the stigma, because unfortunately we all think about other things very often. We think about protecting the disabled. How could they travel alone? We're thinking. It's full of dangers. Then parents are very often afraid for their children. So people with developmental disabilities often remain children for life, and it's also our fault. So it's important to combat the stigma. It's very important to encourage them to be self-confident as well, to be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to understand what they want, and of course develop their skills, develop their knowledge together with socialization. This is the logo of our organization. We are active in all 5 counties of the New York City, and we strive to enable the most productive and independent ways of life for our members. Our programs are daily social rehabilitation, parental help, for example, for parents to be able to leave for a weekend. It means a highlighted date on the calendar on the fridge, because it's very important for the parents. And this is something that our children want as well, and the adult guys and girls as well. They are 20 plus, and they have all graduated schools. They want to be independent from their parents as well. We have a lot of additional projects that could help our members to develop. We have a great art therapist in our staff. She's a young girl. She used to be a soldier in Iraq. She came back from the war. She graduated from a college as an art therapist. She's got a degree in this field, and she works with our members and has great results. It's completely voluntary. She has 3 groups every Monday, 8 persons in each group, and Fridays are open days. The room is filled to the brim, and we are looking for a bigger room to fit it all. I worked with her personally in a short project to get an understanding how it works. She begins with short sessions, and then she moves on to longer sessions. Projects like that take 5 or 6 or 8 weeks, and her progress is phenomenal, and the progress of the members is phenomenal. She does several things at once in her project. She tries to increase brain plasticity or elasticity, to engage all regions of the brain as much as it's possible, and to do various things with the members. For example, sensory experience. What can be touched, what cannot be touched, and what are the differences between different touch sensations. She starts working with simple items, pencils, for example. They're easy to handle. But for example, clay or small sand-like materials are completely different. She calls them dirty materials. That's why you see here quotation marks. The members work in gloves, and many take their gloves off as they work, because they get acquainted with these materials, they get used to them. It becomes natural for them to work with these materials, and especially when something is being created. Those that don't want to do this become administrators, group assistants, and they manage to do it so well. Let's take an example of one girl in our group. She's not very much interested in art, but she found herself as a good manager. She's good at delegating tasks. She shows everybody what is to be done, and she's able to complete those tasks herself, maybe even better. This is a description of this process of learning through art and skill development. We created a wish doll. Everybody had to write on paper a single wish. This is a hard task by itself. So they should write down this wish, then they should cover it in fabric and create a small doll. The whole process took several weeks. We have a boy that had an attention span of 15 seconds, but in this project he was able to concentrate for 15 minutes. This is how they look, the wish dolls of all our members. As you see, they use different materials, and everybody enjoyed this. Some of them made the dolls for themselves, some of them made them for their relatives or parents. Then we moved on to creating masks. That's how it's done. Everybody enjoyed this. Everybody understood what they were doing. And of course they were working with different materials as well. A very successful project was drama therapy. We met by chance the people who do this stuff, and they had never worked with any people with disabilities outside of people with ASDs. We had people who were not able to speak, and they began speaking and did it well thanks to drama therapy. Why? The difference is between speaking for oneself, speaking out one's own thoughts, and playing the role of, let's say, tomato. Speaking as a tomato. That's a different thing. I was able to visit some of their classes, and they have a rule that if you come, you have to participate. You cannot just sit in the back row and observe. You have to take part in the process. This was during the election campaign for the presidency in the US, and all the participants played the roles of presidential candidates with their own policies. They were describing these policies. And they spoke phenomenal things. For example, one girl walked up to the stage and said that her platform is about advocating the rights of people with developmental disabilities. She said, no one should tell us what we can do and what we cannot do. No one should dictate what job we should have. We know it all ourselves. We can it all ourselves. We do it not worse than others. And so I understood that this young lady is able to take part in conferences, and now she has a job. She works 4 days a week. And now she wants to get a second job besides that. Another example of how efficient drama therapy is. The mother of one of our girls called me and said, please don't take any offense. I really enjoy your programs, but I would like my daughter now to do just drama therapy. We'll find a different program for her. I told her, good luck, but there is no such program that does drama therapy exclusively. This is our gardening practice. We are active in 2 parks, and this program is also very successful. Every Tuesday we go out to a park in Brooklyn, across the street from our HQ, and it's completely voluntary. In season we give our participants plants to plant there. Sports activities. Each 8-person group has 2 mandatory sports sessions a week. You know that in many of these conditions, endocrinal disorders are present, and so this is a way to fight overweight, and we believe that this should be mandatory. Now, dancing studio, and it's really successful. Mathematics, reading and writing classes. 3 times a week, at least. It's working hour. We work at different places. And this is quite successful. The girl that I mentioned here, that she has a 4-day job, she works at Petco. It's a pet shop for dogs, cats, fishes, and so on. The best thing that we have is this, leisure. When we go for a sea cruise, you can see what fishes we can catch. So we take part in this together with other tourists, and they are sometimes surprised because our guys and girls are dancing, they eat well, and so on. This is a day cruise. I can't show you the video, unfortunately, because it does not have sound. This was a part of my presentation, but I couldn't inform the organizers ahead. And now, the next point. You remember me mentioning that the broken brittle X chromosome is a very broad definition that is responsible for several conditions. Sorry? And this is an adaptation of a booklet from the UK, and I think these are very good. This is very good advice listed here, and we should all follow this advice. All these materials are present, will be present on YouTube. You will be able to rewatch my presentation if you wish. So I should wrap up with this before we have Q&A, and I will wrap up with a tale, with a story. In India, there was, once upon a time, a water carrier. He had 2 pots in which to carry water. His first pot was perfect, and the second one had a crack, as you see in the picture. But he didn't throw it away. He just began carrying water in those 2 pots. And once, when he was carrying water, he heard someone cry. He looked around, and he understood that the cracked pot is crying, and the pot says, "Why haven't you thrown me away? I'm cracked, I cannot carry all the water." And the water carrier said, "I'm not going to throw you away, because you can do other things, what nobody can. I knew that you have a crack. I know that the water is leaking. And so, from the side where you are hanging, I have sown seeds of flowers. Look what we have done together." So, our capabilities are unlimited in all of us. We should develop them. That's it. Thank you all. Any questions? Good morning. I have a very simple question. You said that your presentation will be featured on YouTube as a video. Yes, that's a question to Lada. Garage's website and YouTube will feature both. Yes, as you have asked, I'm going to answer you quickly. Yes, this lecture and some other lectures from today will be posted online on our YouTube channel, the Garage Museum channel. I've got a question on how they find you, or maybe you are finding your members. So you see, they graduate from school, and their parents and their families face a choice, a hard choice, whether they should be classified as disabled individuals. And if the parents decide for disability and going for benefits, they get into the system. It's called the entry door system. And the US state, any state, has certain responsibilities for people with disabilities. But the state itself does not really do anything. It's a bureaucratic system which cannot complete all those things, and so they contract such entities as ours, we are non-profit entities, to perform it all. We work together with schools, and they have coordinators that help people with disabilities to reach a program that suits them best. For example, if they want to get a job, they enroll in a program that can bring them to complete employment. And this is not suitable for everyone, because sometimes an individual has a very high intelligence level and can have extensive skills, but has behavioral deviations. They cannot fight fits of anger, for example. And we all know that nobody wants to see somebody throwing things around at the workplace. So we should correct those things with them. And sometimes we are successful. Sometimes individuals bring their own friends. We are conservative about our growth. Our organization is small, but we work with a lot of people, so that's why we are conservative. We take in 8 people per year, 8 individuals per year, one group. They graduate from their school, they come for trial days or a trial week to see around, to see how we work. As we are completely integrated into the society, we cannot work with people who have a tendency to run away. I'm sorry. And we have to understand whether we can really work with an individual. And so we have 2 staff members per group. We're completely mobile. Every group has a van in which they can travel. I'm describing our biggest program. You have mentioned schools. In the States, are there special schools for people with learning disabilities? Or do they learn in specific classes at regular schools, or are they fully integrated into the classes at school? This is a very broad question, a good question. I don't think that I have enough time to answer it completely, but I would say yes to everything that you mentioned. There are special schools. We work with one particular school like that. It's located in Brooklyn, and it does a lot. Every school has its own program, its own curriculum, and this school does a lot for the children to attain some professional skills. There are special classes at regular schools, and it's not like there is one class, one group visiting all the lessons at the same time. In a single class, there might be children going for advanced lessons or less advanced lessons, and so they're broken into different rooms, into different groups. And so children with learning disabilities, even though they are part of a regular class, they have their own lessons in a separate room. So that's what I have to say. Any more questions? Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Could you tell a bit more about your organization itself? How long have you been there? How many staff members you have? What's the financing source? We're not 8 persons, and each group is 8 members, and we have 10 groups in the day program. And it's 250 individuals per year. We have been around for 10 years, and this organization grew out of the Accessible Museum Consortium. We have tight connections to New York cultural organizations. When it comes to funding, we have several grants for different programs, and mainly it's the state contracting organizations like ours to fulfill the state's responsibilities in people with disabilities. So we perform our services, and then we're paid by the state for these services. Thank you very much. Do you visit museums with your members? Yes, surely. We have different formats for this. For example, our board of directors often meets at the Metropolitan Museum because our director is also a member of the education department at the Met. And once a year we have a program joint for the board of director members and our guys and girls. Let's say they see sculptures by Degas, and then we visit the workshop and draw the sculptures that we've seen or do something else. And very often these drawings, I have a link to our website in my presentation. You can see the gallery where you can see the works of our members, so they're accessible online. We work in museums. As I've mentioned, our blind participants performed some jobs at the museum. You have a grant from the Lavelle Foundation for the Blind. This is an internship grant. It means that our members go to those museums to work there for half a year, for a term. They work there several hours a week. Mainly these are high schoolers. And of course, after these internships, they gain a lot in their skills, gain new knowledge, and some of them continue working with us for 4 to 5 years in various programs, and they both get paid for this, and they get new skills. And as you can understand, if a person says that they have experience working at the Metropolitan Museum or at Queen's Museum, the Queen's Museum does a lot of our members, does a lot for our members, and a lot of them have it easier after those experiences to find their own career paths in digital arts, for example. But this is, of course, not for everybody. This is a problem here, because this person must have good grades at school to get an internship at a museum. How long do you follow an individual? Do you work with an individual that enters your program? You have described those successful cases when people were able to understand what they should do later. They're able to do this quickly and easily, but maybe some people leave for another cycle of this problem. It's varied from person to person. They're all different. If a person has a disability, then it must have some real cause, and of course not everybody can work, not everybody can live independently. Many succeed, but still many need somebody to follow them, to accompany them, even if they're working actively. This person is able to check their performance, to talk to their manager, to look after them in a manner, because not everybody understands how we can work with people with disabilities. And so we accompany them depending on their needs, and we help them to live as independently as it's possible. Because the problem is, now they're all very young. We started 10 years ago, the youngest were 21 years old, now the oldest is 31. In 10 years they will be 40 plus, their parents are not going to stay young and healthy, so the more independent they are, the more independently they live, the better.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to know a bit more about what is the process that there's 2 social workers to prepare the lessons for each group composed by 8 persons, if I understood well. I just wanted to know how do these lessons are prepared, like are families, professional involved in the contents of the training, like how do you engage with other stakeholders to ensure that there is like the best possible link between like this like educational system to like professional perspectives?
Well, we don't have professional teachers in our staff. I'm repeating the question for the audience. This is a rather complicated question. So once again, I would say that we have 2 workers for each, 2 staffers for each group of 8 people, and this is a requirement of the state. This is the ratio that the state requires. We are surrounded by red tape from all sides. This is in order to ensure safety. DSP, direct support professionals, these are people, these are our staffers. They are not licensed, it's not required. This is maybe the last sphere where a license is not needed. It's enough with a school diploma and a small orientation course for them. But currently there are a lot of mandatory classes that our staff members have to have every year, and they cannot start working before we complete their training. The teachers are hired from outside. A specialist art therapist, a specialist math teacher, a specialist speech teacher, gardening instructor. These are all professionals. But our staff members, it's important that their heart is inclined to do this, because this is a very hard work. And one of our managers said that this is a beautiful job. You're going to spend time with your friends and you're going to pay for this. So that's what we are striving for. Working with friends, helping our friends to develop. I hope this is an answer to your question.